So now within this build method, if we get past a form, which we do for our contact form, then what's going to happen is a new form object gets created. We're instantiating it by using the new keyword, the name of the class, and then we're passing it the parameters that it needs. So let's take a look at what happens when we instantiate our form class. So we'll scroll up to the top where our form class begins. So first of all, we have a couple of properties set. We have settings and form number, and we can actually start it out as one here, which is nice. When the class is instantiated, the constructor is called. Again, that's this construct function, and it takes all of the parameters that we passed to the class. So we only passed it one, which was the settings, and then we're saving those settings into the settings property of this class here. Again, this is available to us because we initialized it up here. And that's all that happens when the form object got instantiated. In the next line, we run the build method. And so again, we have access to the properties within this method that belong to the class. So we have form number, and we're adding one to the form number. We check the action variable just like we did in our previous code. And if we're actually submitting the form, then we run the validate function. So instead of validate form like we had before, we're running the validate method on this instance of the class. If that doesn't return false, then we're going to run the submit method of this instance of the class, of this object. So if you've never worked with classes before, the this variable is a little bit tricky to wrap your mind around. The idea is that each instance of this form class, each object that's been instantiated, is its own thing. All of the form objects all carry the same methods. They all have build, they all have validate, they all have submit. But each instance has its own properties, and it keeps track of those properties on an individual basis. So if we had 5 of these form objects, we can have different properties in each one. The names of the properties are going to be the same, but the values of them are going to be different. So we can access those different values by using the this variable. This is just saying this instance of the form object. All right, so the part of our build method where we loop through and generate each of the inputs has been adjusted a little bit so that we're accessing the settings property instead of using a parameter. And finally, if we scroll down, the last thing that's changed is that we're using the form number property instead of the static variable that we would have used in a function. If we look at the validate method, again, we're using the settings property instead of having to pass the variables as a parameter to the function. And the same with submit. We loop through the this settings right here.